So I wanted to give you an example. In Mississippi, we don't have a lot of statistics here, by the way. We have case reports, we have cases that are investigated, but we don't have a lot of stats on what's happening in Mississippi. We hope to remedy that. But to give you an example of what it looks like to be trafficked within a family, and we know familial trafficking is a huge problem in our state. And it's kept undercover. We don't recognize it unless it's reported. But this is an example of it. So this is a case that happened in Georgia. It happened quite some time ago. But this is mom, and you can tell mom got in trouble. And she's got the height chart behind her, right? Okay. And this is dad. Dad also got in trouble. So mom and dad needed a minivan. So they went to this guy's place, Mr. Wayne Bearden, Shorty's Used Cars. And they bought a minivan for about $240, $280 a month, something like that. So a few months into it, they couldn't afford the minivan anymore. But they needed it. So they kept it, but they got their daughter to have sex with Mr. Bearden for the minivan payment. So by the time authorities got involved, the girl was 14 years old. But she had been having sex with Mr. Bearden for 2 years. This is familial trafficking, where they are exploiting their own to get something back. Now, we had, Dr. Hogan and I continue to work on our language, and we were informed by our national partners that pimp is on its way out because it's been sensationalized. I mean, if you think about the word pimp, we have taken that way out of context. You know, pimp your ride, pimp your kitchen, pimp your faith. Saw it on a t-shirt, real story. We have taken that word way out of context. So we don't use the word anymore. We're trying very hard. We talk about exploiters. These people exploited their own child for something. This is what it looks like. So maybe you need food and you are selling your children out there to get that. So I want to be very clear that what you might be looking for, you know, you might be looking for that white van, or what you might see out there isn't exactly what's happening. It's within our families. Dr. Hogan mentioned our documentary tonight, and we are going to have a documentary on sextortion. If you can be here, that's awesome. If you can't, please Google sextortion and get the information on it. It has become in the news. Anybody heard the word sextortion? Few of you. Okay. So it's been in the news quite a bit. And what's happening, coming to our attention, because this is nothing new ever since the internet came around. But what's happening is our youth who are online, particularly during the pandemic, get friended on social media. And, you know, anybody here on Facebook? Yeah. Okay. Instagram, Twitter, I guess you do those friend things on there. So anyway, you see a friend request and you think, I don't know this person, but this person kind of looks like me, looks friendly, and maybe they know a lot of people that I know, and they seem to know something about me, so you accept the friend request. And then you're just sort of going along with your posts, and they post things, and then they want, you know, some more information from you, and hey, you look really good, or hey, we are in the same sports, or hey, I see you like this kind of music, I like this kind of music too, and they develop a relationship. You've got that relationship going, and you're like, wow, this person is really cool. And they say, you look so good. Oh my gosh, you are so good looking. You are so pretty. And can you send me some photos? And send me some explicit photos. I won't tell anybody, this will be just between you and me. But it would make me so happy if you would do this for me. And that's where it starts. So sextortion is blackmail, where the youth, and when I'm saying youth, it can happen to adults, but with youth, it's a significant problem right now, where the youth will go down that path thinking this is somebody they can trust, even though they've never met them in real life. And if you look at these, this thing on the study, they sent images never knowing this person in real life. And they thought maybe they could be an adult, but they sent the images anyway. So the exploiter will take those images and say, I want more. And maybe the youth says, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And the exploiter says, you send me more, or I'm gonna send these photos to your family, and they're gonna know what you did. You send me more, or I'm gonna send these photos to your school. Everybody's gonna know. And so the youth complies. Either complies by sending more explicit photos, sometimes paying money, and eventually, sextortion itself is not human trafficking, it leads to it. Because now you've got this person, and they think, oh, if you meet with me in person, maybe it'll stop. Right? So they're gonna go meet with them somewhere. And that's where the exploitation, the commercial sex acts can come into play. Absolutely insidious. And it's so hard to control because even if you think, okay, well, I've got parental controls on the phone that my youth has, they know 50 people with phones and they can have access anywhere. So how do we prevent this issue? We've got to have more awareness, more education of our youth. All y'all are adults out there. We need the youth. We need the 10-year-olds and the 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds to understand what this is in plain language. So at least they have some sort of way, an understanding, a basis of knowledge to deal with this. Now, another thing that's hitting our campuses called sugaring. You know, sugar mamas, sugar daddies, sugar babies. I'm hearing a little, you know, how many of y'all have heard of this? Okay. All right. Seeking awareness, seekingarrangements.com targets college students. Because guess what? College students don't have any money. They can't afford books, they can't afford good meals, maybe they can't afford rent. And you can go to seekingarrangements.com and they cater to email addresses that have .edu at the back of them. Because they know, but they say they screen out, they say they screen things, they say that they, you know, make sure that everybody is of age. But then once you start meeting the person, this is where it can be this leading to human trafficking, leading to exploitation. Everything's going fine and you're getting a few good meals and these are really great and I get to dress up and this guy tells me I look good. And then he wants a little bit more and all of a sudden that force, fraud, and coercion comes into play. And you didn't even see it coming because you thought this was a nice person that was just wanting to meet you for dinner. Because that's what it says on the website. How many of y'all looking this up right now? It's okay. So I also want to bring in male victimization. It's very important. We hear about females all the time. Females are easier for researchers to interview or to get survey information because we have services for them. We have places where we can see them and meet with them and maybe they're getting some sort of therapeutic services or they're to a point where they can talk with us. Very few resources for males. So it's harder for us to access. So we don't see the male population as much. But I'll tell you, when I'm talking to male survivors, they say they're exploited by both male and females at about the same rate. Females. Definitely not the ones portrayed as exploiters. But they're exploiting at the same rate as males. They're preying on males the same rate. So the trauma factor is about the same for males and females. They still need services. They present somewhat the same way, but we need to put this more into our dialogue. Just like we need to make sure we've got all races, all ethnicities. We also need to make sure we have gender put in there. Not just one way of looking at it. No idea what time it is. But you just go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to just hone in on this aspect real quick is that service providers, I know we have many service providers here at different state agencies. I want to bring forth this website, giantslayer.us, is our lived experience expert. Instead of calling that individual survivor of sex trafficking, his name is Nathan Earl, and he's on our federal grant. He's our lived experience expert for the next 5 years that's providing education and reviewing our protocols and procedures. So if your agency, nonprofit or, governmental agency needs to understand more about male victimization, we want to offer that resource to you. Please reach out to our booth out here. It has Soaring in Mississippi. Grab that to learn more about that and also connect you with that understanding. His name is Nathan Earl. So again, victims look like anybody, but many anti-trafficking groups relay the message that anyone can become a victim of trafficking anywhere, but this is not always accurate. As you honed in, again, that unfortunately the reality of Black African-American girls are disproportionately victims of sex trafficking, and moving that knowledge base along to help these individuals. Here are some potential barriers to trafficking, victimization, and potential identifiers. I'm getting ahead of myself. So in reading all these doesn't automatically say that that's a victim of trafficking, okay? We need our specialists to be called to identify and to go and investigate the situation. However, research shows, and our work with victims through the years, is that if an individual has multiple cell phones or other items beyond the financial means. Example, I was working with this little girl, she was 14 years old. I worked at a place called Streetlight USA. It's a home for up to 60 young girls that have either been victimized in the sex trade or at high risk for trafficking. And she came in and she had 3 cell phones, a Louis Vuitton purse, and a new pair, and I wanted them to, the high dunk Nike shoes. And I realized, knowing that that kid was in CPS custody, could they afford that? What do y'all think? No. And the unfortunate reality that it's a red flag. And unfortunately, the FBI had brought that individual to Streetlight, that little kiddo. But that was a telltale sign that there's something else going on here, right? Why does that person have these multiple things? And someone who seems to be controlling the victim by not letting him or her answer questions. We see this often within law enforcement, is to understand that that victim is going to look at that individual to see how he, she, or they should answer the question. In the hospital setting, we see a long history of injuries, STDs, or pregnancies. Again, these are red flags. It's not saying that that's a victim, but we need to delve more into it. The unfortunate reality of symptoms related to trauma. So aggressiveness, emotionally reactive, unfocused, or distractible. Tattoos or brands, we talked about that, not particularly the barcode label, but what we've seen, a case that I'm familiar with, I'm from Ohio, I saw law enforcement was able to connect a flower tattoo on the hand of one victim to 7 other victims, and they found that they had the same trafficker. So this can help with identification, but it's a branding. It's now saying that he, she, or they, that trafficker, now owns them. The unfortunate reality of a high-risk runaway is something that we see often, is a big risk factor for trafficking. Another little kiddo, she was a little spitfire. I love this little kid. She was 15 years old. I worked at a behavioral health hospital in Chandler, Arizona, and this little girl was a spitfire. I loved her in group, and she was getting ready for discharge. And I go in on the weekends. I was a PhD student at the time, and I go on the weekends to help the kids discharge. And she said to me, "Miss Hogan, I'm not gonna go back to my mom or dad." And I said, "Well, this is, based upon your discharge paper," and she was fired up. She said, "I'm not going back. You need to understand that my mom and dad, they do drugs, they drink, and my boyfriend, I was better off with him than the life I had at home. So if you would send me home, I'm just gonna run away." And for me, that was the eye-opening experience of when we talk about these runaway kids, is that the chaos at home sometimes is trumped by the life, the glitz and glamour, the life that a trafficker can offer a kid. History of truancy, so within our school systems, involvement in the juvenile justice or child welfare system. A lot of those indicators and history of abuse are potential identifiers that something might be going on. And then why don't these individuals self-identify? So many people ask, including myself when I first got involved, not to shame anybody, right? Is that, why don't they just get help? We hear this all the time. Well, if they're in this unfortunate circumstance, why don't they just reach out and get help? Well, they're being told multiple things while they're being victimized in a trafficking situation. They're told to don't trust anybody but me, or my wifey, which is part of the stable situation. Oftentimes the trafficker will have the most trusted, usually a female, run the ring or the circle, and they're just told to trust these couple people. They fear their personal safety because they've been told that, why, if you don't do this, I will shoot your dog, or if you don't do this, I will do X, Y, or Z. They fear safety for their families, their personal safety. This is a big one. They may not understand their rights, right? Especially these kiddos that are in our juvenile justice and child welfare systems, and kiddos that the language of they choose to do it. Well, really, if they're under 18, they have options and they may not know their rights. So it's our jobs as social work agencies and the individuals that can help them to explain those rights. Many may not identify as victims, and they often blame themselves. Oftentimes, this is more than that. And the current situation may be better than they came from. That situation with that kiddo at the hospital, that it just really brings home to what's going on. And there are potential barriers to identification for professionals. So when we talk about within our systems, many who are exploited do not know that they are victims of crimes, and some are unaware of their rights and may believe they are to blame. So when we talk about identification, it's hard because of the nature of the crime is hidden. We have to know, as social workers, as child welfare, as nonprofits and governmental entities, what are the red flags, and then what are we going to do with that information? Who do we reach out to? Who do we go to for help to further identify that and investigate it? And hopefully today, if you don't know who that person is, that's what we're hoping for today. Between this break from 4 to 6, we want you to connect to those social service agencies, to make those connections. And if you say, I still don't have the connection, we know some people in this room today that can make that connection for you. So please reach out. Personal biases related to commercial sex acts. Dr. Hurst and I did a pilot study here in Mississippi last year, and we found that some individuals within the child or youth services didn't particularly look at that these kids were, how am I going to say this? We're not going to, they choose to do it of themselves, accord, so they are not victims. Well, based upon today in the federal definition of trafficking, are they a victim? Yes. So it's unwrapping that personal bias and getting to the root of understanding what that law is. And the reality is we need to help those kids, but many people, again, including myself, I didn't know it either, that removing that personal biases, like Dr. Hurst was saying, take a step back, open your eyes to see what's really going on. And then perceptions of those who are exploited. That's a throwaway or disposable individual, just heinous language that oftentimes we see within society. Dr. Hurst.
Okay, I want to make sure that we have some time for questions. So I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. I want everybody to know when we're talking about children that everybody in this room is a mandated reporter. That the first 2 words, any person. So that means if you are sitting here, you hear my voice, you're a mandated reporter. So if you suspect, you don't have to have the evidence. If you suspect, you need to make that call to child welfare. They have online reporting if you feel more comfortable that way, and you can be anonymous. But according to our law in this state, if you suspect it, you need to report. So if you've seen some of these things that we have talked about today, or if you need more information, we have information out at our table about our website. You need to think about making that report. And like I said, it can be anonymous. You don't have to put your name out there. I also want to make sure that you understand that any child who is exploited or trafficked is also considered an abused child. We understand child abuse generally. We know that if a child has marks or if a child has experienced some sort of sexual contact, they are an abused child. Trafficked children are abused children. So if you see something related to what we were talking about today, it is incumbent upon you to make that report. If we don't have reports, we don't know what's happening and we can't protect our youth. I'm going to give two quick pieces about labor trafficking because I want to get to those questions. This was a case, if you think labor trafficking doesn't happen in this state, this was a bit ago, but this was Signal International. And after Katrina, Signal International had sent recruiters to India to find people to do work for them. And they made them all kinds of promises. They made them promises that they would get appropriate documentation, that they would make enough money that they could send it back home, that they would have a place to live, that they would be fed and given work clothes. But what happened was they got here and none of that occurred. No documentation. These photos on the bottom are actually storage containers. They would put up to 24 people in each one of those. No hygiene was provided. If they needed any supplies, it was like the company store. They had to work for it and they were never out of debt. There were rumors about armored guards. When this case was discovered, it went through the federal courts, and to this day, it stands to be our largest labor trafficking case in the United States. So keep it in mind, it's there, we're just not looking for it. Okay. I want to make sure we understand our industries here in Mississippi. I'm sure you'll recognize these: seafood industries, factory work, domestic work. These are all areas. I'm not saying it happens in every industry. If you own one of these businesses, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are risk factors involved. Think about construction. You go from place to place, you don't make those connections. It's a place where labor trafficking could occur. If you just keep it in mind, that's all I'm asking for. All right, sugar, yeah, let's do that. We have lovely people with microphones. They're like, uh-oh, she quit early. So if somebody has a question for us, if you could raise your hand, and we will make sure we get a microphone to you. And I promise, if you have the question, somebody else probably has the same question. So please be brave and ask. Raise your hand.
Testing.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This has really been some great information. And my name is Terry Peters. I'm with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And thank you for mentioning Signal and labor trafficking. Like you said, is an honorable mention that really just doesn't get as much attention as human traffic or sex trafficking, but it's very important and we want to know how we can be involved in it. So thank you for having this event. It's a great event and it's some really great information. And I'm learning a lot.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to connect with you. And also Ashley Lucas, if you could raise your hand real quick. Oh, perfect. Yeah, so last year, Ashley and I were trained by federal entities on wage and labor violations. And I sparsed out that data and ran it through mapping software and looked at different, and this doesn't mean that labor trafficking is actually occurring, but we're looking at the high-risk sectors across the state and trying to target efforts. So we'd love to have a conversation with you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm Gwen with Loving Through His Eyes Ministry. And my question, I have read that the highest sex trafficking comes out of foster care, the foster homes, foster parents. What is being done there to ensure that these children are going to safe homes? And how close of an eye are you keeping on these children? Because, I happen to have two family members that are in foster care. Well, one is a runaway now. She's 18 and she left. But I have another one that's 17 out in California.
That's a good question. Thank you very much. So Dr. Hogan and I have been trying very hard to get our child welfare services trained throughout the state. It's been a little bit of a journey and we haven't quite gotten there yet, but we are forever hopeful that that's going to happen. You're absolutely correct about youth who are in foster care. They are vulnerable just by their past experiences. So they're coming from situations that may have been traumatic, and then they go into situations that may be dangerous for them. Now I know CPS, if there's somebody from CPS here. Hey, do you want to field it or do you want me to just keep talking? Pass the microphone.
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and take over CPS on this, okay?
Okay.
So. And I do want somebody to mention that I am taking up for CPS as a prosecutor that works for CPS, because they're probably gonna be very shocked. But, the way that it was phrased by you was that it's children in foster care are the highest number of that's technically not correct, though. It's runaways. And runaways are more likely to be children who then are placed, a CPS report is made and they're tracked and we're trying to find them. And then we find that they later are trafficked. But I have had, and by the way, I work in this field, in this area for Forest County. I prosecute human trafficking, sex crimes, child abuse, all of that. I've never seen a foster care situation where a child was in foster care and those parents trafficked the child. That I've not seen. I've seen parents who have trafficked their own child. And I've seen CPS and our state system step in and stand in the gap for that child and be there for them in the middle of the night. I mean, respond and help children who've been kidnapped or put into unsafe situations and take them and put them into a loving foster care home. That doesn't mean that we haven't had abuse situations in foster care homes. I have seen that. Most oftentimes the foster care mom's boyfriend or something like that, or another foster care relative or something that is subjected to the child, but that's going to happen everywhere. But I've never seen any human trafficking cases that I know of where a child is taken from their parents, placed into foster care, and then trafficked. They run away, but they were running away anyway from their parents. They were already running away. And so I think it's really important for us that I know the statistics that I've seen. It's runaways are the highest number of human trafficked victims, not foster care kids. So I'd like to make that distinction if possible.
And I truly appreciate the distinction. I do want to say we are reframing the runaway title to say missing children rather than runaway, because runaway has almost a victim blaming type of connotation. There are push and pull factors on why these youth leave their homes. So we need to think about what's involved with all of that. Now, I also want to say, my Secretary of State person, I responded to this earlier about statistics, being lies, damn lies, and statistics. We do not have good numbers on anything. So foster care, I can't say it's foster care. I cannot say it's missing children. This is one of the pieces of information that we try to overcome. We don't know. We just don't have the numbers. So I do appreciate your point. I'm very happy you haven't seen it in our foster families. But I can tell you that it's probably happening there. But we can continue that. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. I would just like to say, as a pastor in the group here today, what is it that the churches can do to assist with identifying trafficking?
I love that question. There are programs out there that are programs related to safe sanctuary and other programs where you can bring in training for the faith-based community, and we can get some resources for that training as well. But our faith-based partners have long had opportunities to be able to train their congregation and their workers. And I see Ashley Lucas down here nodding her head, giving me validation on that. So we can get you that piece of information, but there are trainings for faith-based communities. So I'm so glad you brought up those partners. Thank you. We got people.
Hi, thanks for presenting this again. Now my perspective is from a clinical psychologist, and I've worked with different populations. I work with prisoners, women prisoners, veterans, and just different populations. I'm a journalist. And though it may not have been reported in foster care, the prisoners that I work with, they talk about a lot of ways in which they run away from foster care all the time because they were being used for sex or being bartered out for sex. These are their personal stories that they have not told people, but they usually will talk to the psychologist. There are a lot of things that have not been reported. So I agree that that should be more research out there. So there are a lot of things, a lot of ways that that you can cover up things in a sophisticated way and intimidate children or people who are vulnerable, that things won't be reported because everything that's out there is not reported and a lot of research is needed. There's a lot of venues and ways that we don't know that I hear about all the time. And so a lot of what you're saying doesn't surprise me, doesn't like, oh yeah, I don't get because I hear a lot of horror stories from all backgrounds, socioeconomic, ethnic backgrounds. So it just, for men and women, children, all ages. So I just wanted to add that perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One of the things I want to mention as researchers, we're talking about the most vulnerable populations to be able to get in contact with. We have to go through much red tape to even be able to talk with them, which is why we don't have good numbers. So yes, it's happening. We have a lot of anecdotal stories out there, but it's very challenging to document it and get the evidence that we need. We're trying. We're still working on it. Okay. Just a couple questions left. Thank you.
How are y'all connecting with the children that's been harmed or, psychologically hurt? Because I know a lot of children are scared to talk to people. As an 18-year-old who've been through that a long time, what are y'all doing to show that we can trust y'all?
I want to just send that appreciation for that question. The ones that you're talking about have been let down by multiple systems and have been re-victimized by a lot of our systems. And it is hard, so hard to find somebody to trust. Our language sometimes isn't great and sometimes we mess up, but I urge every youth to keep trying, to try to find that one person that you connect with and keep looking, because there are people out there to help. But I want to tell you, it's hard to find them. I was at a foster care conference and somebody approached me after my talk and he had never told anybody. And he picked a stranger just because something I said resonated. I don't even know what it was. So please keep looking, please reach out to people and we will help. We can help get you connected, not you personally, but we can help get people connected. So thank you for that question. Okay, one last question.
Am I the last question?
You are, make it a good one.
It's a question, but it's also a comment. And I listened very clearly to the faith-based minister at the top, because she is here because of a meeting that we had. About 1.5 years ago, we decided to look into human trafficking. And I got with Miss Lucas and Mr. Collins, and we had about 10 persons that are working in human trafficking that were on our Zoom summit. And it was one day, but the information we got still has us sitting in this summit today. What we did see were women that were on that particular summit that had been abused and misused. They were in their 50s, 60s, and one of them in her 70s. And they all, after that conference, went and talked with someone about what happened to them. And so we are concerned. We have helped one of the agencies, the Methodist Children's Home, and what they're doing. And so we're just excited. And I'd like to encourage any other faith-based institution in here to try to do the same, because you never know who you're going to help.
Thank you so much for that.